Welcome to Deadline, exciting, vibrant, intelligent discussion where politics and media meet. I'm Carey Campbell. On our show today, the 2012 elections, Green Party presidential primary surprises, Hollywood TV and movie star Roseanne Barr, Green Party presidential candidate, first in media attention, climbs to second in the primaries, and the Republicans pulling shenanigans in Maine. It looks like they're going to reverse the election up there. We'll go live in the studio from Maine. Patricia Helen Lamarche brings us the latest. The U.S. economy. The president presents his budget for fiscal year 2013. The federal fiscal year starts October 1st, 2012. Opposition leaders say the president's 2013 budget is dead on arrival. And in Europe, the economy. Greece looks like a teenager on the debt deal. First saying yes, then saying no. What would Plato and Socrates say? Go to your room. And in the media, Bradley Manning, the U.S. Army officer accused of leaking information to WikiLeaks, has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the group the Movement of the Icelandic Parliament. Manning is facing charges of aiding the enemy, wrongfully causing intelligence to be published on the internet, theft of public property, of records, and transmitting defense information and fraud-related activity in connection with computers. That's according to a report from CNN. The former Army private could face a lifetime in the penitentiary. The Arab awakening. Egypt's military and parliament keeps working their way toward presidential elections. Libya works to get its administration, judicial, and jails in order. Our guest on the show today, Occupy Wall Street, D.C., Jason McGaughey, and the director, Ivan Lee, of the Center for Peace, Liberty, Independent Institute. And via Skype, from Maine, Patricia Helen Lamarche. Pat Lamarche ran for the Green Party as the vice presidential candidate in 2004. In 1998, Pat Lamarche ran for governor in Maine and won ballot status for the Green Party in Maine. And again in 2005, ran for governor. Welcome, Pat Lamarche. Welcome all. Pat, let's first come up to you up there in Maine. If you can, tell us what is going on there. Have the Republicans lost their mind? Is Ron Paul the winner, or are they going to let everybody vote?
Well, you know, ever since 2000, we shouldn't have expected people to actually count the votes. Now, should we? It's been quite a mess. In fact, today we had on our show up here, I host a morning talk program 5 days a week. And on our program, we had the Washington County head of the Republican Party, who is not the least bit pleased with the head of the Republican Party for the state of Maine. And we interviewed him today about what happened. See, the caucus process in Maine is different. We're allowed months to caucus. And that's so that a little old lady doesn't have to worry about leaving her house with snow up to her eyeballs and not being able to get to the caucus. So there are months and months and months allowed for the Republican caucus, the Democratic caucus, and the Green caucus, because the Green Party is an official party up here, to be held. And so the Washington County Republicans said, you know, the weather's supposed to be really lousy up here, and we don't want anyone to endanger themselves to have to vote for a presidential candidate. So they postponed their caucus because of the inclement weather that was coming. The state party said that was fine. It's okay to postpone it, but did not tell them that their votes would not be counted if they postponed it. Because of that, they announced, and I blame the national media for running with it. I think they should have. They didn't learn obviously anything from Iowa. The national media should have said, well, these are the votes that have come in, but Maine's caucuses go on for a long time, and we'll have to wait and see what the rest of the counties come in. Now, Waldo County, another county up here in Maine, has since announced their votes. Their votes were not in by Saturday, and it put Ron Paul many votes closer to taking the nomination win in Maine away from Mitt Romney. The new Washington County caucuses are this Saturday, and they intend to go forward. They also think that Rick Santorum is going to get a lot of support up there because that's what we call down East Maine, and that's where there are a lot of evangelical Christians. A lot of folks will be chiming in with what Rick Santorum feels.
Now, Pat, did I understand what I read correctly and what I've heard? Is the Republican Party in Maine going to allow these votes? There was some talk in the media on Rachel Maddow last night that the Maine Republican Party had said, well, you guys go ahead and vote, but we're not going to count them. Is that right?
Well, they can say, except for the fact that the national media uses this to say whether or not Romney's on a roll, they will have a Republican convention at which time delegates will be assigned. At that convention, the convention is the only time it matters what the vote was, because that's when the delegates will be assigned, and they will not be assigned according to these caucuses. So literally, Maine could go to its convention, have overwhelming landslide for Ron Paul, and the Republican Party could still give all the delegates to Romney.
Amazing. Pat, we're going to pause just a moment. We're going to come to the guest in the studio here. Ivan, what is your take on this? It doesn't sound fair to me, does it you?
Well, I think you could have a replay of Iowa, but maybe not. I mean, of course, it's all a media show anyway because, all that counts for the nomination is the delegates that you get, when the Republican National Convention comes along. But as the previous guest said, this is, used by the media to say, well, is Romney the done nominee, or is he in trouble? And of course, Santorum has already put him in a little trouble by winning the 3 states out in Colorado and the 2 Midwestern states earlier. So, and of course, the media always wants a 2-person show. So there's Romney, and then there's the alternative. And of course, the conservatives have been competing for the alternative, and they go up and down in the polls. And now Santorum is up. So we don't know what's going to happen, but the media likes a show, and so they've got to have something to cover until November when the main election occurs, or at least the summer when the conventions occur. So that we have this sort of a bizarre process, but this is democracy at work, and I think it's not perfect. But eventually, maybe the person that actually gets the most votes will be in office. But of course, the way our system works, we're not even sure of that in the end. But certainly, the process that goes forward, and it's entertaining for those who are into it.
Jason, let's give you your shot. The young man from Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, and Occupy D.C., the man on the front line. The people have changed the dialogue to the 99 percenters being unfairly treated by the 1%. What's your take on this odd version of democracy they seem to be practicing, the Republicans seem to be practicing in Maine? And of course, Pat, we're going to come back to you in a minute here for more on what the other parties are doing up there.
I tend to think a lot of what's going on is mostly political theater. I don't see a whole lot of democracy in it. It's mostly on who has the most money to be able to compete the longest. And so Newt was getting $11 million from Sheldon Anderson, which basically propelled him back into the race. And Santorum's getting high-profile donations to keep him going into the election. So I mean, I think it's not so much about the vote of the people. It's more about who's contributing to the finances, the notion of the super PACs being controlled, and just the financial gains. It's more political theater than actual democracy to me.
Money talks and Blarney walks. Pat Lamarche, back to Maine. Tell us about are the Democrats having a primary up there, and what about the Green Party presidential primary in Maine? Pat Lamarche.
Yeah, everybody has to caucus. It's a state law, and they have to caucus by county. So every county has to have at least one caucus. The big parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, they will caucus in cities and towns all across the state. But if in really huge areas, I mean, we have a county up here that's about 3 times the size of Massachusetts. So we have some really big counties that have nothing in them but deer and trees, and so those won't have as many caucuses. But every party has to. I just want to say one more thing about the Republicans real quickly, though. Ron Paul was up here about 10 days ago. And I went to that. We covered that here at the radio station. We covered him being in town. And I'd say 65% or more of his audience was young people. Those are the people that would have been Barack Obama's supporters 4 years ago or 3 years ago or however long ago he was He was saying he was against the wars and against the Patriot Act. And he got 3 standing ovations. Ron Paul got 3 standing ovations from this packed room, standing room only, that was mostly young people. They were for eliminating the Patriot Act, getting rid of the Military Authorization Act, which allows the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens, and also for ending the U.S. penchant for policing the rest of the world and waging war at our whim. Certainly the drones are out there bombing the heck out of stuff now. And so that Ron Paul is really resonating with this 99% that your guest was talking about. And those are the young kids on the street who are wondering if their student loans are ever going to get paid. And it was really impressive to watch that happen. Now, the Democrats will have to caucus. They'll do it all in one day because their boy is already picked. And the Green Party, of course, will caucus again. But there's also the Americans Elect movement, which is up here in Maine, and the only way they could get on the ballot without having the name of their candidate was to start a political party. So the Americans Elect Party has been started in Maine, and they will also be caucusing in 16 counties, all 16 counties.
Pat, I'm glad you brought that up. So quick, one question about the Green Party. Now, and I'm going to come back to the Americans Elect. On the Green Party up there, Dr. Jill Stein, the Harvard Medical School graduate, and then the Hollywood star that I spoke of, Roseanne Barr, in the open, are they both on the ballot there as caucuses, or do folks have to be on the ballot? Tell us how that works exactly.
Kent Mesplay is also running for president. I love Kent Mesplay. I'm really proud of him. The Green Party at times does some things that make me pull on my hair a little bit. And one of the things they did was they had this, if you'd like to run for president, fill out this paperwork stuff. Jill Stein filled it out and Roseanne Barr filled it out, and Kent Mesplay said, I'm running for president. You know, that's the way it goes. This is the United States of America. You know, maybe he gets paperwork in, maybe he doesn't, but he's an official candidate for president for the Green Party.
So he's on the
run before. He ran in 2008, and he ran for the nomination in 2004. He's a great guy. He's a PhD. He works in air quality in the state of California. He is not only an educator who goes to businesses working on air quality issues, but he's also a regulator. So if someone disobeys the air quality laws, he can fine them and sanction them. Jill Stein, Dr. Stein, fabulous candidate. She is an authority on toxins in the atmosphere, the workplace, your diet. She's one of the foremost authorities on toxins and their effect on children. I think Kent Mesplay and Jill Stein, 2 homegrown candidates. Jill Stein has gotten 17% in the statewide election in Massachusetts.
Pat, we're going to have to interrupt you just a second. We've got some comments from the street, and we're going to go listen to those right now. And then we'll come back and hopefully let you finish. And also, I have a key question about Americans Elect right after we come back.
Issues. I think that they should, put the country first and just do what's right for the country. I think that their views and their concerns and their issues are just not what's best for America.
Well, I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention. I'm generally independent or Democrat, so it's mostly I've just kind of been waiting around for them to decide.
Well, as a Democrat, I am delighted with the Republican candidates. I couldn't be happier. But also as a disclaimer, I want to say I work for the Democratic Party, and I just think their candidates are great.
I don't support the Republican ideals in general, so I'm not a U.S. citizen, but if I were a U.S. citizen, I would support democratic ideals, what the Democratic Party stands for, not what the Republican Party stands for, in general.
So, Jason, what you see there is folks offering opinions on what they think of the election of the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, the Greens. What's your take on it right up to now?
My take on the elections, I think me and most of the people in Occupy were rather disillusioned with the whole Democratic-Republican dichotomy. We see that that really they're kind of 2 sides of the same political coin. Both parties represent corporate and financial interests. Both parties are continuing U.S. imperialism abroad and economic imperialism as well. So we're rather disillusioned with both parties. A lot of people are planning on not voting, and a lot of people are planning on voting for third candidates, basically anything to kind of disrupt the 2-party dichotomy.
Say that last part again. You're not voting. I mean, Pat Lamarche has just talked about options for the Green. Another one And are you saying that some of the folks in Occupy would still not be interested in that? Did I understand you correctly?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for everybody.
Sure.
I myself am planning on voting for a third-party candidate. I believe that's the only real hope that the country has. But there's a lot of people who are just rather disillusioned with the voting in general, and the last election kind of symbolized to them the absolute destruction of American democracy, that there's not really any hope in the political system. And so they're more seeing that the only real hope we have is people power in the streets, and hoping to kind of the rising of consciousness of the American people to understand what's going on as far as economic inequality in this country, and also the effects of U.S. foreign policy as well.
Ivan, the Peace and Liberty Institute, that's where you are. Did I get the title right?
Institute for Peace and Liberty, yeah.
Which candidate in this election do you see, or party do you see advancing those causes and addressing the concerns and about the younger generation that Jason has discussed?
Well, I have to say, last 4 years ago, I was an advisor for Ron Paul, so I'm partial to him, of course, but I'm not partial to the Republican Party. I think that both parties do collude, and this is just like two giant companies which have been what they do is they pretend to compete, but they sort of, there's some competition, but they hold it to a minimum, and they sort of cut backroom deals. A lot of what you see on TV of them fighting is really sort of for show. I mean, in the end, the payroll tax cut will get extended. That's an example, because if they don't, there's going to be hell to pay at election time.
Could also be called starved Social Security.
Well, you could, yes, but the point is that people will be outraged if this doesn't pass, because there's a lot of people who get their paychecks who will see their paychecks decrease. Once you give a benefit to anybody, whether it's a corporation or a person, as we see in Greece, you can't take it back or they start rioting, right? I mean, so either don't give it out in the first place, or you better keep giving it out. But so I think that's what we're really seeing here. I would call it a sort of a constrained democracy. We have two choices, and it's very interesting because Americans are very proud of their competitive free market economic system, but when you get into politics, they're equally proud of their, oligopolistic, if you will, political system. So I would like to see more parties, and we do have other parties, Green Party, we've been mentioning that, Libertarian Party, et cetera. But these parties, the way the system is structured, have absolutely no chance of winning. Now, third parties haven't... Maybe
not getting elected.
No, but the third parties have had a great influence in American history on issues. Since it was Ross Perot in the 1992 election, he basically got Clinton elected, but also he was very focused on the budget deficit and that sort of thing. So that's an example.
There are people who would not agree with that statement. Pat Lamarche in Maine, just quickly, you're in the studio there at what radio station?
I'm at WZON, The Pulse.
Okay, excellent. So we wanted to get you there. You were finishing a point about some of the Green candidates in Maine. If you heard something here you want to comment on and get to. The other interesting thing...
Real quickly, the only people you vote for when you vote for someone is the person whose name you checked. You don't make anybody else president. That whole spoiler myth is something that's very important to the major parties to keep alive.
Well, I think it's true the way the party system is set up. You have to alter the party system. That would not be true if we had a multi-party system. But in the way the system is constrained, it takes votes away from other people.
47% of the population that's eligible to vote doesn't vote. If those people voted, a third party could easily win.
And in fact, Greens, Libertarians have been elected.
But they probably wouldn't vote for the third party.
I think they don't vote because they're disenfranchised, and so that disenfranchisement, if someone could renew a person's faith, which is what you're talking about, and the other gentleman has been mentioning that people have decided they're just going to give up. How can they give up any more than they've already given up? We've given up. We have the government that proves Americans have stopped caring, and we have the government that bombs other countries because we didn't stop the country from bombing them. I protested. I didn't protest hard enough. I ran for vice president. I didn't run hard enough. We own this country. We are the people. We have to do it.
Yeah, I tend to think that like people in the Occupy movement, we haven't given up. We're just more rather disillusioned. Like we hope for a changing country, and we're just not sure with the way in which the political system is set up. With I myself, my hope is within the third-party candidates, but most of them aren't able to get on the ballots in most states, and aren't able to get the same media attention.
It's pay to play, sure.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's my point. Ballot access, you have single-member districts with a majority requirement to win, et cetera. The whole system is set up to reinforce the two major parties. And in American history, we've always had two major parties. It hasn't always been the two we have now, but it's usually the way the system is set up. You have third parties come and go, but there's always two major parties involved. And I think that the system is nothing is going to happen until the system itself. And you can read not voting two different ways. I mean, when you see Arab Spring countries where they haven't had democracy, those people go out and vote. We're fat and happy here. It indicates that there's not a lot of protest on the system. Now we have the Occupy movement, which protests, and you have the Tea Party on the other side, which is protesting. Those are small groups of people. You don't see massive uprisings in America.
Let's go to the street and see what people are saying about the impact of Occupy on the body politic and the public discourse.
I think to some degree it has. A lot of blocking traffic, but I think that the idea behind it is still strong, and I wish the best of luck to them.
I think it has.
Oh, I think it's been great. What is good about it is drawing attention to the issues. What I'd like to see them do is now take that movement that they have going and work to get folks elected, work on legislation, and take it to the next level.
Pat Lamarche, back in Maine, talk a little bit, if you would, about Occupy in Maine. Rough weather conditions for that up there.
Oh, yeah, but we have had some hardy folks. And I have to tell you, the Occupy movement has given me more hope than I've had in 51 years. I am thrilled to see that. I've been part of protests that were really large. I was at the March for Women's Lives in 2003 or 4, I think it was, maybe 2004. There were more than 1 million people there. Of course, the major media, if anyone who thinks that the major media is doing anything but the agenda of the elite that own our country is deluding themselves. And I was part of the protests of the war when George Bush was rushing the war, and there were millions of people protesting that as well. I just think that we're discounted, just like those votes were discounted in Washington County by the Republican Party. When it doesn't match what the corporate media wants for the story to be, we don't hear about it. The Occupy movement is a breath of fresh air, and I am so hopeful. I have two young people in my life, my kids, who are both in their 20s, who are so saddled with college debt. And it wasn't that way when I was a kid, and I wasn't a kid 800 years ago. I was a kid 25 years ago.
Jason is nodding his head here, our spokesman for Occupy Wall Street. Go right ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of for kind of a disenfranchised generation, Occupy kind of symbolizes the most hope we've had, at least in my lifetime. It's the most hope that I've ever had, and kind of the idea that like all social movements take a considerable amount of time in this country, typically like years to generations or decades, and Occupy is only about 5 months in. We've already managed to considerably change the dialogue within this country, and so we've been beaten and repressed out of our occupies through our encampments throughout the country, and so now it's kind of a transitional period, but we're kind of gearing up for the spring in Washington, for May in Chicago, for the G8 in NATO, and for the RNC and the DNC, and then August and September. And so we're kind of gearing up for some big events and trying to draw attention to kind of the corporate influence. Like there's a protest against the corporations, against ALEC here coming up in about a week or so, and against like the prison-industrial complex, and kind of growing understanding of the tensions between the U.S. and Iran, and trying to draw more attention into U.S. imperial policy. And so there's kind of a lot of things that are building to keep kind of rejuvenate the Occupy movement and hope to bring like wider attention to the general public about kind of what's going on in U.S. policy.
Ivan, we want to come to you now, and if you can for us, tie this into the economy. Do you think the American economy, its bad period that it's just gone through, do you feel like that has impacted Jason? You might mention this too, and Pat up in Maine. Has the economy been further fuel for Occupy, for action?
Oh, I think yes. I think to some extent it's people in the Tea Party. There's a lot of they were against bank bailouts and that sort of thing. In some issues, the Tea Party is the same way. There's a populist movement out there, and the economy has the poor economy has fueled that to some extent, I think. And it's not just that, but I think it will be the main issue in the election. Certainly, it usually is. And you can pay attention to all the media ins and outs and who's ahead and whatever. But bottom line, Obama usually has good numbers, and if the economy improves, he'll win. He has incumbent advantages. It will be close. If the economy goes back into a tailspin because of the euro crisis or whatever, then he probably won't win. Romney will probably win, and I think Romney will still be probably the nominee of the party, of the Republicans.
So Dr. Kent Mesplay, Dr. Jill Stein, Roseanne Barr, all of those people, you're writing off there with that. Pat, I want to come to Maine for a quick comment on the economy, and then we're going to go and see what the folks on the street are saying about their view of the impact on the economy. How is the economy in Maine, Pat, and in the Northeast?
It's pretty dismal. It's a cold place to not have a decent job or not have a decent paycheck. But I spent the last 3 years of my life running a homeless shelter in South Central Pennsylvania. And the homeless, I was just writing a Huffington Post. I wrote for the Huffington Post about it. Homelessness has gone up an estimated 1.5 million people, in addition to the chronically homeless we had at the time that the economy crashed. So we've got upwards of 5 million people living on the street, living in shelters. The economy, it's a third world nation in the United States in an awful lot of places. And we have... Thank God for the Occupy movement, because I think it really has. I don't know if everybody else was shaking their head when they extended the Bush tax cuts, but I certainly was. Like, what in the world are we doing? Have we lost track? And I guess the answer is yes.
Pat Lamarche, you wrote a book about homelessness. What's the name of that book?
Left Out in America.
Left Out in America from Pat Lamarche. All right, we're going to go to the street, and when we come back, Jason has something he wants to say, and see what folks are saying about, are we in a recession? Are things better? What's the feel on the street?
Well, because things haven't gotten that much better. They're coming back to normal. My personal belief, it'll never be back to the way that it was before. I think those days are long gone, but we have a ways to go with that.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, that's, we're still, I believe, in recession. We have too many unemployed people. We've got to do more, and I'm looking forward to what Congress does with the president's budget, because I think what he's done there will help us with rolling back that tax cut and keep it going forward.
We're back with Jason McGaughey, Occupy Wall Street, D.C. Jason, you had something you want to say?
Yeah, the issue of homelessness was brought up, and so I wanted to comment on that.
Pat Lamarche. Pat
Lamarche, yes. And within Occupy, there are a number of people who were homeless before the Occupy movement started, and especially in the Occupy D.C., there's a considerable number of people who were already living in the park, and as Occupy set up, have joined the movement. It's been just a rather beautiful thing for people who have been homeless to feel empowered and to begin fighting for their own rights and for the issue and for housing. Like within the United States today, there are more empty and abandoned houses that have been foreclosed on than there are homeless people in this country. And the issue, I mean, it's just rather stark when you think about. It'd be rather simple to house everybody in this country, but we choose to instead to empower banks and financial interests rather than the needs of the mass majority of the people.
You know, it's been a lot of talk about money this week in the United States because the president presented his budget. I just want to run a few quick numbers by you. The federal debt at $15.4 trillion. That about matches the gross domestic product. The budget under the sequester budget, $3.6 trillion. And military The U.S. military portion of that is going to be about $630 billion. Compare the Energy Department's entire budget to that, $27 billion. The Transportation's entire budget to that, $72 billion. And by the way, of that energy budget, 30% of the Department of Energy budget goes to managing nuclear weapons. Gentlemen, could this money be better invested, or better yet, for some, Ron Paul, for example, if we were to cut U.S. military spending by 90%, we could pay down the annual deficit. What say you, Ivan?
Well, I think the defense budget needs to be cut drastically, but you also need to cut the entitlement programs if you're going to make a budget deficit, or you have to do something with them, because they're really eating up a larger portion of the budget by far than defense. As big as the Defense Department is, Medicare and Medicaid are the two elephants in the room, and during the Bush administration, they did a really irresponsible thing, and that was they added another benefit to an already teetering Medicare program. Social Security is in bad shape, but Medicare is even worse, and they added this prescription drug. And many of these seniors don't really need this sort of thing. If we want to give it to the poor, fine. But a lot of these people are middle class and rich people, and so the government gives out welfare to the wealthy all the time. Banks, farmers, businessmen, but also individuals. They give out tax breaks to rich people. They give programs to rich people or middle class people that don't really need them. You get to deduct the mortgage interest, the interest you pay on your house. Now that's a bad incentive. It causes people to borrow instead of save, right? So the government does a lot of things that aren't very smart, and sometimes they can contradict itself. The government hands out tobacco subsidies and then runs anti-smoking campaigns. So, I mean, that's a classic example, right?
Well, it's two different lobbies. Ivan, let me suggest to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. As someone, in addition, who's anchored the news, who's also worked as an accountant for 25 years, you could clearly balance the federal budget by reducing military spending by 90% and just letting the the taxes rates return to Clinton next year. What Ron Paul says is true. What Jill Stein and Roseanne Barr say is true. Pat Lamarche, quickly in Maine, what do you say?
Well, Social Security has never contributed to the deficit, not one penny. Social Security is not a part of this problem. The biggest entitlement in the entitlement programs, and the thing that makes me angriest, is that the national debt's interest is rolled into the entitlements because it must be paid and cannot not be paid. A solution to our problem isn't to screw the elderly just because they're not able to fight back. And that's exactly what axing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are all about. What we need to do is
the elderly are the richest group in America. These kids are the ones that are getting screwed. Social Security is a very unfair system.
I could take you. You are invited right now to come to Maine anytime you want. We are the oldest state in the union. We have more old people than any other state, including Florida, which is the myth of the world. That's where maybe the richer elderly are. But I got to show you scads of elderly poor, people who are only taking a shower.
Not because they're old.
Once a week. They're heating the water on
Let's
their wood
help them
stove.
because they're poor and not because they're old. I have no problem with that. Social Security goes to everybody.
Medicaid entitlements are not entitlements, they are benefits paid for people who paid insurance in. And I think the fact that we are willing to discuss that, when you already brought up the bailouts to Wall Street, the $50 million bonuses to Bank of America, when you want to talk about what's costing this country money, it's that end of welfare, the corporate welfare.
Corporate welfare is a lot. I agree with you, but there's welfare to other people. There's welfare to various groups in the country, and the elderly people have a big political group down here, a big lobbying from the AARP, and they're basically taking money from their own grandkids, is what they're doing, to be blunt.
That's absurd. What's taking money from grandchildren?
No, it's not absurd. It's really not absurd.
Money that we have borrowed from China to pay for these wars that we should have been waging. The money, the debt service on the money we borrowed.
Well, I have no problem with getting rid of the wars, but I also think you need to do something with people who don't deserve Social Security because they're too wealthy.
Well, I mean, I think as someone who's from the younger generation, I think most of us are more concerned with ending the wars and like drastically reducing the military budget. Also with ending corporate welfare. I think we're more concerned about the notions of people getting the rich getting wealthier off our backs and indebting us than we are that our grandparents are able to survive. I think we're much more concerned about corporate welfare and
But many of the
policies.
people that have the most money are older.
Well, I mean, I don't deny that there are wealthier old people.
This is the classic argument. This is the thing that's kept the United States divided and kept us from being able to throw those bums out that are running the very top echelon, the Congress and the executive branch. This is what's kept us from doing it. We're fighting over whether or not some 10 or 15 or 5% of the elderly who might have a decent income should get the axe instead of arguing.
It's not 5%. If you look at the categories, the older people have all the income rises as you get older, and also your assets get bigger, and therefore older people have money and younger people don't.
Well, I mean,
we are fighting an argument that's a waste of time because the few old people who are actually making out okay are nothing in the world of debt and what's costing this country money compared to the $50 million bonuses on Wall Street, compared to the military-industrial complex.
That's not true. I mean, Social Security and Medicare, you look at the figures.
Armies we have right now in Iraq,
you got to look at the numbers.
Well, one at a time. My next question is going to be: has the current administration done enough for the economy, for the old people, for the young people, for the people who need glasses? Who wants to tackle that?
I think there's too much debt.
But before that, we're going to go to the man on the street. All right, we're going to see what people are saying on the street, and then we'll come back. Thank you.
I think he's done a good job, but he could definitely do more. And a lot of the problem is coming with the Republican-led House and preventing him to push through policies that I think could continue our growth and really sustain this development and getting out of the recession.
He's done some mistakes, but I think overall he's done the good job. I would support him, if I were a U.S. citizen. I think he is the right person to be facing the difficulties that the country and the world is facing right now.
I think that he has tried to do a yeoman's job on bringing back the economy. Everywhere the poor man turns, there's always somebody against him saying something about him. He just can't do anything right according to some other people. But I think that he wants to do the right thing. His heart is in the right place, and we just need to support him as president.
Well, I mean, I think that he certainly hasn't done enough. I mean, he caved on increasing on the tax cuts for the wealthy.
The president.
Yeah, the president did. He caved on the Bush tax cuts for the wealthy. He caved on the so-called Obamacare. He dropped the single-payer issue to help even out the cost of Medicare. The issue that we should all, instead of our premiums going towards executive pay to lobbyists, he sold out that instead to big interests into the big pharma and the insurance companies. He's increased the military budget and increased imperial policies, the bombings in Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, the increase on covert wars, and we're still funding. We got caught about a month or so ago trying to send 2 tons of tear gas to the military regime in Egypt, and so we just signed we're selling arms to the Bahraini government to empower the monarchy to further suppress people who are fighting for democracy. I mean, he's not actually fighting for the people. He's fighting for the same. Obama got
as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, he gets most of his donations for his campaign from the financial elite. I mean, the very same Wall Street backers that are corrupting the economy were the same ones that helped finance his election in 2008. He's already claiming to get the biggest, to have over $1 million for this coming campaign. So I mean, I fail to see his interest in the American people instead of the same corporate backers as the Republican Party.
Pat Lamarche, what about this president's performance, and what about your party's candidates and alternatives?
I said that Obama promised change, but all he changed was his mind. He has caved in on all those things, and then the worst thing I think that's happened in his administration is he signed the Military Defense Authorization Act with the indefinite detention of you guys, you two men right there, you young people speaking out. you could be detained for the rest of your life without charges ever brought against you, without habeas corpus. We suspended everything. 1215 was when we got these rights through common law, and it's absolutely amazing that 93 senators passed it. Rand Paul voted against it. 93 senators passed it, and the Congress passes it, and the president signs it. Are you kidding me? This is not. If we had a Republican president in there, we'd all be fighting him tooth and nail and saying, you can't do this stuff. Yeah. But because President Obama's in there, people are saying, well, he's trying. He's doing his best. Well, I sure hope this election year makes him remember who got him elected. And it was those people who thought the rich should be taxed, the military needed to be cut, the poor needed to be cared for. The stimulus package that they passed was the best thing his administration did. I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who lost their houses get housing when I was running a homeless shelter. I saw that money hit the street and do good things, and he doesn't even stick up for it. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
Ivan, we're very lucky. Pat called two of us here young. It must have been you, couldn't have been me. Go ahead.
There's probably only one young person.
I think that's fine. Thank you, Patricia.
But I would say I agree with her in large part because what you see, people are surprised by this, but that's what you see is the collusion. I mean, Obama's supposedly a liberal Democrat. George W. Bush was supposedly a conservative Republican. But if you match their policies and you just put them down in a ledger on one column, like an accountant ledger, like you're familiar with, you see very similar. Bush bails out the banks. Obama bails out the car companies. For some reason, their bankers are Republicans and car companies are Democrats. I'm not sure what that is, but I mean, the underlying lobbyists. When Obama passed his health care bill, the first thing that happened was insurance stocks went up. Now, what does that tell you? And I saw on a public TV broadcast where they were talking shortly before that vote. They were talking to the president of the Insurance Trade Association, and the guy, the anchor, kept trying to get him to condemn Obama for this outrageous policy against the free market or whatever. And the guy goes, he wouldn't do it, and finally the guy goes, well, I guess you're pretty much okay with this, and he goes, yeah, we're pretty okay with it. And therefore, you see what happens when we have these big initiatives to do anything. The lobbyists come in and they grab the goodies and go. And that's what happens if you have a Republican president or a Democratic president, because the lobbying groups are strongest. And if there's not a groundswell, that there's only a few issues. The way the American system works, there's only a few issues that are paid attention to by the general public. And those issues you can make changes on. The rest of them, the lobbyists, for whatever group has the advantage, have a lock on it. Now, if you can raise that issue up so that the public gets an idea of what's going on, you may be able to change it. But on the other hand, sometimes the public does the wrong thing. So you can't, even when the lock comes off, they may do the right thing or the wrong thing. And in the case of Obamacare, I would say that they did the wrong thing. There were lots of well-meaning people, but what happens if the insurance company's stock is going up after the vote? It means you've restricted the competition in healthcare further from what it is, and you're probably going to pay more for healthcare. And then we're all going to be surprised the next time when healthcare costs keep going up. We have 50 state markets. There's no competition in any of them. We need a national market with competition, true competition, and the price would probably come down. It's not the only thing that's driving up healthcare costs, but that's an example of where the lobbyists come in and they grab whatever they want. Industrial lobbyists, in this case, for the health insurance industry, but you see it with banking. You see it with car company bailouts, etc.
Deadline is also about how the media is covering these issues. And, of course, Patricia Lamarche at your radio station there once again where you are?
Yep, I'm at WZON and The Pulse, we call ourselves, in Bangor, Maine.
And how is the media covering in the Northeast of the United States up there? How's the media covering the Occupy movement? And you're on the radio every morning, aren't you, Pat?
Right, from 6 a.m. till 10 a.m. And folks can listen live online at zoneradio.com. Just hit the listen live icon on Pulse so you can actually hear it all over the world. But I think the major media has done a horrible job, but they don't work for us. They work for the stockholders. It's and I think when they took the public option off the table, which I knew it wouldn't make it to the table anyway. We know how healthcare. I just want to throw this in about healthcare. We know how healthcare works because other states pay less. Other nations pay less and live longer, and that's universal healthcare. Canada pays less, lives longer. The United Kingdom pays less, lives longer. Japan pays less, lives longer. What kind of idiots want a system that you pay more and you die sooner? That's just crazy. So we know what the solution is. We just have to embrace it. But Nancy Pelosi, Obama, all of them, they all took that stuff off the table, and that's to our detriment. And then the media sells it for them. And the media is the biggest problem. And that we're an independent radio station. We're an absolute dinosaur. We are an independent radio station. We answer to no corporate master, and we speak freely about what happens, and we get everybody's opinion who's willing to come on. We have a lot of people who won't come on because they're afraid they're going to get ripped to shreds, and well, they might be right.
How do you feel, Jason? Refreshing, Patricia, Helen Lamarche. Thank you, Jason. How do you feel as a member of Occupy? Occupy broke through with the media coverage. Do you feel you were covered fairly and are being covered fairly?
None at all. It wasn't until about the second week of Occupy. I was arrested on the Brooklyn Bridge, where over 700 people were arrested, and that was kind of the big breaking point when we finally started getting media coverage. But if you look at it, like it's been mostly when I was up in Wall Street, like there were articles about like Zuccotti, get the animals out of there. There was all sorts of negative ads and like saying that we don't know what we're talking about when we're talking about many different things because there are many different things that are wrong with this country. And it's been a very negative coverage so far.
Let me just say, you're really cleaned up compared to the description of Occupy people in the media that I've read. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I tried to clean up a little bit. It's a little bit difficult being.
Well, just to make the point that
the
maybe the coverage wasn't exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of people within Occupy. There are homeless. There are people who are very well educated and very well employed. I mean, it's a wide diversity of people. But I mean, like when you look at the media coverage, most people in Occupy understand that the corporate media isn't going to cover us well when 90% of all print, TV, and radio is controlled by five or six major corporations. So it's not going to get the interest of the people out there. It's going to get the interest of the corporations and the powers that be out there instead of what's actually affecting the masses.
Ivan?
Well, I think we could always improve the media competition, and certainly corporations do own broadcasting, but I think we have more. Remember back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we only had 3 networks, and now we have more than that. So we have cable, we have talk radio, we have public broadcasting. So there are a variety of outlets. Americans are not starved for outlets. What we see in the media is that people watch the outlet that they like, that agrees with them. Now, previously we had sort of faux objectivity from the 3 networks, but now we have more.
What kind of objectivity?
Fake objectivity.
Okay, all right.
But I think now what you see is you have less fakery and more people coming out with their opinions. Like Fox is conservative, MSNBC is liberal, CNN is probably left center. The major networks are probably left center, and but you do have talk radio. I don't think the conservatives can necessarily blame the leftist media because there are conservative media outlets, but there are people who complain that their viewpoint isn't represented. But I think there are a wide variety of sources that you can go to, and if you don't like that, you can go on the internet and read foreign newspapers. And a lot of times I think foreign newspapers have a better perspective than our American newspapers on U.S. foreign policy, which we tend to be very jingoistic and that sort of thing. So if you can go to foreign, the internet has opened up the whole world to people. So I don't think it's the idea that there's no other choices, but I think we have more media now than we have in the past. But people don't like what one source says or the other source. They don't like how they're covered or whatever. And some of the coverage that media is sort of a herd, and a lot of the media, I think, are too dependent on government sources for their information, but both left and right, depending on who the administration.
32,000 uniformed personnel in the U.S. military work in public affairs. I once did myself. So to make your point.
No, but I mean, I think that's not necessarily. I mean, that's way too many because the government is not supposed to lobby or do anything like that, right? That's not really lobbying, but it's a PR, where taxpayers are paying for the PR people to spin their own stuff, and other departments have maybe not as many, but they have public relations people too. But I think my problem is that the media really needs to dig deeper rather than just follow what the government officials say. And a lot of times, you can get kicked off the White House press plane if you write a critical story. So, there's this unseen thing that I'm not going to write that critical story because I need information from the government, right? And they have classified and unclassified and even proprietary information is held in the government, and reporters want it. So if they want to get it, they have to stay in good, at least a little close to the government to get it.
Let me shift the conversation now to the Arab awakening and what's going on over in Bahrain. I received an email just this morning. Someone Pat Lamarche, as a Green Party leader, former Green Party candidate for U.S. Senate, Medea Benjamin, yesterday was with demonstrators in Bahrain and was tear gassed along with others. Pat, do you feel that there is a blind spot in the U.S. media for coverage of Bahrain when maybe we do hear about Tunisia or Libya or Egypt, but little about a situation like in Bahrain, where people, as I understand it, are demonstrating for rights and the ability to participate more in their government?
Too bad Medea didn't have to go so far. She could have been tear gassed in Oakland.
I think she has been, Pat. I think she has been, actually.
I get the biggest kick out of the United States shaking and wagging its finger at other countries when we have such a struggle for democracy right here in the United States. But I think that you're right. I think there are regions du jour, and there are things that it's easy enough for the people to understand. And in a 90-second soundbite, you don't have to explain to too many people where Egypt is because there are a lot of movies about the pharaohs, and there was Moses and all that stuff, and occasionally someone knows about Egypt or some other parts of the Middle East. But when you start getting to more exotic locales, you'd have to educate the American people. And I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way about the famine in the Horn of Africa. I mean, where's the discussion of that? Thousands of people dying every single day, starving to death, and we're not even chatting about it. I mean, there is an awful lot going on.
Is there a double standard?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as Bahrain goes, Bahrain it's an absolute monarchy, and it's a Sunni monarchy and a majority Shia populace. The U.S. Fifth Fleet is housed on the shores of Bahrain, and as the Shia majority was rising up to saying that we want democracy, and they were being violently suppressed, and then about the same time that we started bombing in Libya, Saudi Arabia sent in troops to violently suppress the Shia who were trying to get democracy in Bahrain. And so the U.S. just got caught trying to send more arms to arm the Bahrainian regime. And at the same time, the Shia minority within Saudi Arabia about that time last year was trying to rise up and say that they want equality within that country, and they were violently suppressed. So, I mean, there's a huge double standard. Like, the United States has been propping up the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia since the 30s for oil wealth. But I mean, there's a huge double standard within that whole situation. But the Horn of Africa was brought up. It's the worst famine in 60 years, and so Somalia, there's massive drought, and so instead of fully funding relief efforts, we're instead continuing to fight a covert war there with drone attacks. There's a secret prison in Mogadishu where we're actually torturing people there, and also, I mean, within, in 2006, there was a government that kind of took power within Somalia. It was a Muslim government, but it was relatively moderate, and a U.S.-backed coup through Ethiopia ousted that government, and that's where Al-Shabaab came to power, and we've been fighting them since then. But I mean, there was relative peace in 2006, and so and Al-Shabaab hasn't been allowing in certain Western relief efforts into Somalia, but that's been because the CIA has been used to do tracking into those areas and covert missions. So I mean, we haven't been addressing these issues in large part because of jingoism and U.S. imperialism and other kind of covert issues going on.
Well, the U.S. policy has always been that we'd rather have friendly governments than democratic ones. I mean, we've actually overthrown democratic governments in Iran in 1953, in 1954 in Guatemala, in 1965 in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and also in '73 in Allende in Chile. So
Patricia Lumumba Congo.
Other countries don't have. Other countries act.
The list goes on and on.
Yeah, Lumumba in 1960, yes, in the Congo. But other countries do this as well. The problem with we have democratic rhetoric, but we really have a realpolitik under the surface. And the big problem with Bahrain is the Fifth Fleet base there, and that's why you're seeing the U.S. A little bit more reluctant to back the opposition there. In fact, backing the Saudis who invaded and repressed the. But you see, we backed the opposition wholeheartedly in Syria and Libya when we didn't. They're unfriendly regimes. So you see the difference. And then in Yemen and Egypt and Tunisia, we were kind of reluctant to back it, and then we saw it was, overwhelming, and so we. Got off the horse and got on the other horse. So it's a realpolitik type of operation.
We're going to go quick outside for opinions on the street about this double standard or possible double standard.
It just looks like an increasingly precarious situation, and ultimately we can't stand with a government that's totally estranged from most of its people.
Well, the U.S. has supported the Bahrain government before and after the oppression against their own people, so that's nothing new. That's nothing new. I think for those of us who have studied U.S. history and history of other parts of the world, what we're seeing in regards to how the U.S. treats other countries is nothing new.
I don't know what's going on in Bahrain.
I do not know what's going on there.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, they don't know because the American media hasn't reported it, and if I didn't know some of the Americans that are there, I too wouldn't know. We've got about 30 seconds for final comments from everyone. Just in this morning, of course, the situation in Greece, they still can't seem to reach agreement there. Is that going to, if that all falls apart in Greece and they keep making all those military purchases over there, Pat Lamarche, is that going to make the economy worse in Maine?
I don't think austerity measures are necessarily the solution to either Europe or the United States. I think that what we need to do is we need to balance the wealth in the world and stop having the richest few put everyone else into abject poverty so that they can live the lifestyle that they choose. I think we've allowed ourselves to be manipulated by the story.
Ivan?
I don't think they should bail out Greece. I think they should let it go under.
And
they've been irresponsible, and the Germans shouldn't have to bail out Greece. I mean, Greece has been totally irresponsible. 1 in 5 people work for the government in Greece. It's corrupt, and those people should not expect to retire at 62.
So Goldman Sachs got their money, and now they can run?
I wouldn't bail out those people either. I don't want to bail out countries or banks or companies. Greece has been irresponsible, and they have. If people are not held to pay their debts, then they're going to keep doing that. And the U.S. the U.S. government has been bailing out banks since 1817, and therefore the bankers are going to keep doing the same thing.
Well, I think kind of what's going on is throughout Europe and Greece and Northern America is kind of like the Western powers are beginning to feel the same pressure that we've been pushing on poor countries around the world for a long time. We're finally beginning to feel the IMF policies that we've been pushing.
A little bit of our own medicine?
Exactly. We're being structurally adjusted, so that means cutting of healthcare and education and privatization of resources.
Thank you both very much. Pat Lamarche, what's the name of that radio station?
The Pulse, WZON.
We thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you very much, Ivan. Thank you very much, my friend from Wall Street, and Patricia Helen Lamarche in Maine. It's been a joy. Thank you. We'll see you again next time. I'm Carey Campbell.